We are just collecting the funds for lunch.
That's important.
It's, yeah. And is anybody on the phone?
Hi, this is Angela Wilson.
Hello, good to hear you.
Thank you for arranging this. I appreciate it very much.
So then, do you want to call the meeting to order?
Well, I guess, okay, let's bring the meeting to order, and I guess the first item of business is to...
Is welcome and introductions. Yeah. So we have two new members. Michael San Francisco also wanted to meet us through the phone line, and he's not on yet. So, but we have Dr. John Mogford for first time here, and so maybe we can introduce each other. So I'm Reinhold Cornelius, and I'm Assistant Director in the Division of Workforce Academic Affairs and Research, and Acorp is part of my duties to be the liaison to Acorp and NHARP. And maybe you can start and we can... You have to push on the...
There we go. Much better. Name's John Mogford. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Research for the Texas A&M University System.
Welcome.
I'm Ren Cleveland, longtime member of the Acorp and retired TI, and currently do consulting.
Hi, I'm Betty Sue Masters, and I'm the Robert A. Welch Chair in Chemistry at the UT Health Science Center in San Antonio, and I'm serving as the Vice Chair of this committee.
I'm Alan Bowling. I'm retired from Texas Instruments, where I spent 32 years in semiconductor research and development.
I'm Bob Curl. I'm a emeritus member of the chemistry department at Rice University.
Ramanan Krishnamurthy. I'm a professor of chemical engineering at the University of Houston.
I am Roberto Osegueda, professor of civil engineering at UTEP and also vice president for research at UT El Paso.
And I'm Dale Cherry, and I'm in NHARP staff.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, yes. Dr. Wilson, can you...
Sure. I'm Angela Wilson. I'm Regents Professor of Chemistry at University of North Texas and also Director of the Center for Advanced Scientific Computing and Modeling here.
Thank you. Yes, so we have to get used to that. We have special permission to have people call in over the phone line. And also, I would like to remind you that we are webcast. That's now mandatory. That's why we're actually sitting in this room, because this is the facility for the agency where we can be webcast. And that's a new rule, and that's why we're sitting here. Hello?
Hi, this is Michael, San Francisco.
Welcome. This is Reinhold Cornelius.
How are you?
And we just went around introducing each other. So maybe you can, since you're a new member, you can introduce yourself to the group.
Sure. So I'm Michael San Francisco. I'm at Texas Tech University, and I used to be the interim vice president for research, and I'm now the dean of the Honors College. And I'm a biologist by trade. I notice there are many chemists around.
Very good, thank you. And everybody else, the 9 members are here. And Dr. Angela Wilson is also on the phone line, and everybody else is here in person. And I take it you probably can see us on the screen.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm just doing the conference.
Oh, okay, okay. That's okay. So we have Dr. Curl here, who is our chair, and our vice chair, Dr. Betty Susaila Masters, and Alan Bowling from TI, Ren Cleveland from formerly TI, now with his company, Dr. Ramanan Krishnamurti from University of Houston, Dr. Roberto Osegueda from UTEP, and Dr. John Mockford from Texas A&M system. And as we said, Dr. Angela Wilson on the phone.
Okay. Thank you.
So the first item every year, we have to, advisory committees have to elect their own chair and vice chair. And since we haven't met since last year, and this is the first meeting of the year, we have to do that again. And so we would need a motion for election of a chair.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Congratulations. And now we need this a similar motion for vice chair.
Move Betty Sue Masters to be vice chair.
I second.
And all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Congratulations as well. We are sailing right along. So the second or the third item of business is the summary notes from last August. And since I only finished this compilation of the materials last night at 10, as Betty Sue noted, you will get a couple minutes to look this over before we vote or make amends and vote on it. The next full board meeting is in July, end of July, but the cause meeting, which is the subgroup of the board, meets in June.
Noting that the appointments have.
Oh, the membership appointments? That will happen at the January board meeting. It's now, all advisory committees are more regulated. And so Acorp is, we can of course go to any board meeting for it, but it will happen regularly in January.
Dr. Cornelius?
Yes?
This is Michael. I can't hear anything from your end. Is there silence in the room right now?
There's silence in the room. Yeah.
Oh, yes, everybody is reading through the summary notes from the last meeting in August.
Okay, thank you.
Have a copy?
Yeah, that's why I emailed it out last night, and I hope both.
Yes.
I think this seems like. Yeah, has anybody found anything that? Has anyone found anything that's not accurate in the summary notes?
Good.
So I second Ren's motion that we approve them.
Okay.
Second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess I should take over a little bit, but you're
Yes.
feel-
Now take over, and I jump in with explanations.
Yeah, please jump in. But, the professional needs to jump in to correct the amateurs. Not close enough, huh? So, item 4 is clearly in your bailiwick, Reinhold. You need to review the competition and the staff recommendations.
Yes, this will be the main. This is the main purpose of this meeting. We had the competition since you met last time, and we would like you to, and we will guide you through what we did, and we ask you to look over the procedure, how we did it, and the outcomes, and then recommend to the commissioner to make the awards in the end, if you so see fit. And so the next pages are the documentations we put together for you, and much of that will end up on our webpage, not the first page, which gives you the timeline. So the timeline, you see it started in August with your meeting, and then we had several steps. We had a pre-proposal stage. We had a period for institution selection, and we go over that in a little bit more. After that, it was followed by 6 weeks of pre-proposal review. From there, proposals were invited, and the proposals were written in the early part of the year, in January, February. Then the review happened late February and March, culminating with 2 sets of panel meetings, which were conducted by long-distance phone call and internet communication tool. And it ends with today's Acorp meeting.
Can I interrupt briefly to talk a little bit about the decisions that were discussed in the summary notes? The problem is that we don't have very much money. We have the program has $1 million, and we are hopeful that it increases. And I guess the high water mark was $60 million for both.
Originally, it was 60 million, but that was for ATP and ARP, and now we only have ARP, and it used the high margin mark, as you call it, was 20 million. So it was 40 million for ATP and 20 million for ARP.
So with a relatively small amount of money in the program, there's large concern. We have a large concern about minimizing the administrative costs for the program. In particular, we pay the reviewers for their help. And so the consequence of this, we had to limit the program in scope to just these 2 fields. So these are different from the last biennium. We had to limit the, sorry, I'm squealing. There. We had to limit it to a smaller group of investigators, and so that's the reason for the limitation to young investigators. I think we've been most concerned, and we need to discuss this a little bit, about having the institutions do pre-screening. This is some sort of paranoia, at least on my part, that institutions will not do a good job of pre-screening. But we felt like we just had to do this in order to cut down the number of pre-proposals to something that we could have a relatively limited number of reviewers to run the program. And so that's what I would particularly like to hear or get some information about is what the result of the institutional pre-screening was, and how many, what was the breakdown? Maybe that's here. This is the.
Yes. If you look at the tables, so 2 pages on from that timeline, the first table shows you notice of intent. So we asked everybody, all principal investigators, who all faculty can register with the system. And Office of Sponsored Programs verifies that they're faculty. And once they have done that, they can send a notice of intent. And so we got 269 notices of intent for the 2 research areas. And so right away, we knew that there was a considerable pressure coming in. Nothing else is being done with the notice of intent in terms for except for planning purposes, and most of the investigators who sent us a NOI also then wrote a pre-proposal, and that's on the following page in the first column. Number of submissions by investigators of pre-proposals. So there were then 256 pre-proposals. And the pre-proposals are the 1-page summary of the proposed work with an added resume and another sheet with the graphics.
So only 13 people did.
Right.
Now, there is one comment. Was there some, as I recall, there was some minimum number of pre-proposals that an institution could submit? Was that 2 or 1?
No, they can submit 1 to as many as they like, but only 1 pre-proposal by 1 investigator and no collaborations between investigators. So it's a very simple, straightforward thing. But there were no limitations on pre-proposals.
Well, except that we had decided that the total number of pre-proposals would be 150. And so I'm sort of jumping ahead. I think I'm wondering, I can't remember, I think any institution could submit at least 1 pre-proposal.
Right, so that's the next step.
Okay.
So we had more than 150, and Acorp in the last August meeting had decided that we should work with 150 pre-proposals in terms of load for the outside review. And so we had substantially more than that number. So we came up with proportional share by institution, but not lower than 1 pre-proposal. So if an institution only submitted 1 pre-proposal, they got 1 pre-proposal. And so that reduction then, and because of we left that stand, led to 153 pre-proposals, which were selected by the institutions. So everybody wrote in pre-proposals, but only 153 went forward to the outside review based on the selection by the institutions.
But it sounds like the institutions are following those guidelines then.
Right. They gave us the lists of which ones should be considered, and we took it. And how they parse the proposals, we don't know. That was left up to them.
Right. From any of the academic members of the Acorp, did you see any issues in what happened inside your universities?
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Nothing significant in terms of the way it was assigned. And then U of H, there was a huge surge of people who applied from our university, and that process was handled fairly well internally. So.
In the case of UTEP, I believe most of the proposals that were submitted by the faculty were coming from the colleges of science and also engineering. So I did ask the respective deans to prioritize, and we took it from there.
Yeah.
So it was not really a selection process where we had to triage people. They typically use the criteria on priority depending on who was submitting.
Okay.
Yeah, so both these institutions had to, UH had originally 24 pre-proposals, had to cut it down to 14, and UTEP from 21 to 9. So that left us with 153 pre-proposals, which together were asking for almost $15 million for the $1 million we have available. And those 153 went to the outside reviewers, and we had 6 reviewers on each panel. At the end of the sections, you find the reviewers, and they worked independently of each other. It's by means of electronic submission, and we went with a standard which we had upheld for a long time, that one yes vote will invite a pre-proposal forward, but we suggested a certain limit of yes votes.
And that was what, how did that work exactly? You suggested a limit of yes votes.
Yes, so that, and I forget, Dale, do you remember what the number was?
It depends by the panel.
Yeah. We estimated, because we wanted to, you suggested a certain success rate of about 20% for the full proposal review. We estimated a certain number of pre-proposals that should go forward, and assuming pretty much that we don't get very many yes situations, because there's so many proposals with few reviewers that there was very little overlap. Yeah. So that's what this, and so the number was estimated like that, and it was a little bit different for each panel because the numbers worked out a little bit different.
This summary on this page, funding rates by area, sort of gives one a picture.
Yeah, that summary, which is in landscape form of these tables, summarizes the numbers by panel, biomedicine and energy and environment. And of course, you know, the final fund rate was a little bit higher than we had modeled. You know, the submission for it became out almost 25% of the full proposals. So a quarter of the full proposals in the end were funded, but only 4% of the pre-proposals, of all the pre-proposals.
So how did they handle the funding amount? I mean, they're all about 98,000, right? Something of that.
Yeah, there were up to...
the submissions were more than that normally, right? So did the panels do the cutting down of the...
No, we allowed up to 100,000 per award, and some, as you will see, asked for a little less. But the panels did not change any of the budget.
So they submitted proposals that were 100,000 or less?
Or less, yes.
We told them there was a limit.
I know, we told them the limit. It looked like the pre-proposals were probably more than that, but I mean, you can look at the numbers.
They all got to the limit, I think.
Yeah.
All went pretty close to 100,000, so they didn't leave any money on the table.
Panel.
More than 100 average.
So what I'm not clear about is how we got from 153 to 45.
That was the pre-proposal review. So
Okay,
each
so there was
pre-proposal...
there was actually a review done to decide which should go forward.
Right.
Okay.
Which three proposals, right?
Yes.
153 which were sent forward, as we called it, by the institutions, they went, as it is tradition with NHARP, to the reviewers. Each proposal was read by 2 people, and 1 yes vote, then let it go forward.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. I wanted that to be clarified.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes?
This is Michael, San Francisco.
Yes?
Do you mind speaking up a little louder, people? Because I'm having a hard time hearing you. Maybe my age or maybe my phone or both.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it's us.
I'm so sorry.
We'll try to do better.
I don't know if we can.
Is it okay to leave all the mics on, or does that really?
No, you can leave it on if you know if you don't hear that.
Right, because we were
some
carrying
noise.
on a conversation and the mics weren't on. I think that was the problem.
Oh, yeah, it's very easy
Some people's
to miss.
voices are very soft.
Now, do I need to repeat anything? Did you miss
Oh,
something?
no, I'm good so
Okay.
far. Thank you.
So, and you can see from the table of proposals submitted. So after the pre-proposal round, we received then 45 full proposals, and those are the 8-page body of work proposals with additional materials. You see that some were not quite at 100,000. For example, Lamar University had one for 85, a proposal, 85,000. UTEP had one for 99,934. But we did not allow the panels to change their budgets. So whatever they gave us, up to 100,000 was taken. And the full proposals then went to the 2 panels, and the way it works there is that, again, the panel chair divides up the proposals to the panel members. Each proposal goes to 2 people, one hopefully more within the field than probably the other, because we only have 6 people on the panel, and they are read and evaluated separately. But then through a series of 1 to 3 conference calls, a consensus decision of the ranking of the proposals was achieved. And so the individual assessment flowed into a consensus assessment. And we have done this now for several years. It's done with a specially designed tool where you see all the proposals and the budgets, and you can click on the PDF files to read something if you like. You can sort them in different ways. You have average scores between the 2 reviewers. You have normalized scores. And the energy environment panel made good use of that because they saw discrepancies and that, like the normalized scores between 0 and 100, they worked quite well with that. And then they can fill in ranks and sort it that way. And it's always interesting we as staff listen into those meetings and to be there as a resource if they have questions. And it's always interesting to see that each panel, again, works in their own way, but they address the concerns, and some of the concerns you had expressed in the last meeting. For example, we noticed that they looked at whether a project is really basic research or technology project or a method-driven project. That influenced their decision. And the environment engineering panel, they looked if it was project more focused only on environment or not on the intersections of the 2. So they looked at that. They looked at student involvement quite a bit. That is always important to them. And they, the discussion one panel started at the bottom, the other started at the top, but it's the lower, where the consensus is that the proposal is lower ranked, the discussion is limited and more focused on the discrepancies where a proposal gets high ranking from one reviewer and a low one from the other. That's where the discussion focuses next. And then, of course, they had to battle the gray zone for the number 4, 5, 6, and 7, which are the critical for the funding cutoff.
So if I could raise one interesting point. I noticed the reviewer affiliations. There were no medical school or health science center reviewers that were affiliated with medical schools or health science centers, and yet the titles of the one is basic research in biomedicine. So it's a little strange, but apparently it did work out okay in terms of what the awards, where the awards went.
We had one
School of Medicine from the UAB.
Yes, we had one School of Medicine.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the summary of panelists that you have here, and you don't give credit to that. You have 0%.
Oh.
It's yeah, okay.
I wasn't reading that. I was reading the summary. So yeah, okay. Well, that's good.
Well, we have to look at that. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
sorry to
maybe
pick
they
up
were
on that.
distinguishing between university-affiliated medical schools and standalone medical schools like Baylor. So
It could be.
That's how this came about. We normally think of health science centers.
Well, like in the UT system.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But we probably should change this because it's a
It's a little
medical school.
misleading.
Yes. Thank you. I'll make a note to that.
The Department for Medicinal Chemistry.
Oh yes.
The average load for each of these was about 5 proposals, each of them read, or how many was it, or was it closer to 10?
No, it's closer to that because each proposal goes to 2 reviewers, so it's doubling.
And the chairs reviewed too, or?
Yes, the chairs review too. The main function of the chair is to distribute the pre-proposals and the proposals to the members of the panel, so the person reads goes into the abstract and the title and goes into the expertise of the people and divides it up. And then during the panel meeting, the chair is responsible for guiding the discussion and how it is being done. And making sure that the different voices come up.
So who is the chair of the basic research in energy and environment?
It's Dr. Derek Ellsworth.
Probably worthwhile mentioning, also putting it down as chair in that one. It doesn't say.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Not on this paper.
well, it's quite a bit of work to review 48 proposals carefully, which looks like what the workload was on the larger number of full review proposals, but it's I find it is getting harder and harder to get reviewers. I mean, just in general.
Yes, we find that too. and especially if the funding is low.
Oh, yeah.
Because people do ask how much money is at stake, both in terms of award and in terms of overall impact. And because they want to spend their time worthwhile. Now, I also can report that the reviewers were favorably impressed, let's say, by the quality of the funded proposals, and the excitement about the projects came through when they were discussing it. There were a couple where we overheard things like, this is an idea an investigator stumbled on by accident and is trying to make something out of it. And they gauged it with the novelty of an approach, or how many people are doing something similar, and these factors. So through that, the excitement for the project and the discussion came definitely through. You may wonder why we have on the list 5 in biomedicine and 6 proposed awards in energy and environment. And the reason is that in both panels there were proposals which were in up to 100,000, and more so in the energy and environment. And so we will ask one PI if that person is willing to take a partial award of $40,000. And we expect that will be accepted. We don't know for sure, but it would fund basically a student for that person to work on the project. So,
but you will ask a reduced scope of work, correct?
Yeah, I don't know how that. I mean, they don't have to rewrite anything or so on.
Yeah.
They will do a project and will write up what they do with the funds. Yes, and that's the problem with so little money. If it is just a student, and with no real project behind it, it would make sense.
Right.
But hopefully, there will be other funds that investigator can make use of and
So
create a real project.
Are there funds returned from previous years?
Yes. In previous years, we had funds returned, and like last time, when we only had $1 million and we had 10 proposals, we actually funded quite a few partial.
Right.
But we don't expect much of that to happen now because there's so little money to begin with. All the funds, if funds are returned, they're now in the hundreds or a few thousands of dollars. They're not substantial as in former years, where we then could bundle them and create a $40,000 or $50,000 award.
So to be sure, if there are funds returned, they would go towards this partial award, or do you have backups?
No, we can't do that because we have to write a contract and that, and so that will be set. And because we don't expect very much money, it will likely lapse. It will be taken at the end of the year, and we can't really do. That's why in previous years we had the teacher program, if you recall, where we funded teacher research or RA for teachers with investigators, but there we had substantial
Money.
return. If you have $16 million giving out, you get enough back to do that, but not with this.
I was just wondering, you had 23,000, I think, mentioned earlier, being returned.
Yes, and we don't know yet if we actually get that. That was found in the audit, and it hasn't happened yet. And my assumption is that the institution is still working on their books, and we probably won't get all that money.
Because I think last time around we did have backups that we funded.
Yes,
partially.
we funded 7. I have it back here.
And I want to be sure if there are backups, we need to have them on the table, and or we need to make sure that if any money comes back, that it is appropriately.
Last year we funded 7 additional partial awards, but that came after a year with $60 million of funding. So I don't think this will happen, and we won't have enough to. I don't expect enough to do anything.
But your review panels need to rank order everything in case that line moves.
They do ranked at least 4 or 5 proposals past the funding line.
Good. Okay.
We need to do that already because we have this rider that only 70% can go to the UT and A&M systems.
Right.
And if you look, we didn't have to deal with this, luckily. I was very afraid of that because if you have only 10 proposals,
Right.
You can be in big trouble. And the next proposal, which is not from UT or A&M system, maybe quite a bit far down on the rank list.
Right.
We didn't even tell the panel about this. This is now not being discussed, so it's not part of the decision in any which way.
Yeah.
But Dale, of course, we were sitting there, and the ranking came out, and we knew right away we didn't have to worry.
Yeah.
So as a lead into this agenda item, Dr. Kroll, I think I heard you say that there's some, one of the pressures, I guess is the way to say it, is over the administrative costs, payments going, how you're covering reviewer costs. So if you have $1 million available for awards, what's the total budget for the activity, and how much? So I'm wondering what the overhead is from a reviewer perspective.
We just paid the review teams, panels, and we spent $16,000
for both review panels.
For the review.
Our raises.
Of course.
Yeah.
So it goes by pre-proposal review is separate from full proposal, and the 2 chairs get a little bit more, and it worked out to $16,000.
So I think what you're asking is, does that come out of the million? And I think
Yes.
the answer is yes.
No. Is it? What I'm wondering is that a heavy? I know it's separate. I mean, in which they should be separate pots of money.
No, it's the same pot.
So it's the same pot, but you're drawing the line. We've got $1 million, or
we work with return funds there too. So we had some return funds from last time, and we used it up for. We also saved $3,000 for the merit review. You will hear about in a little while, and I think Dale is cutting it pretty close. We are right now having $900 left if everything is done this year.
that's pretty good.
If not more money is being returned, so that's what we have.
Right.
And and it's not only the cost for review, it's also staff cost. We used to have several people running NHARP. Right now it's basically Dale and myself. But this cycle he did most of the legwork.
So normally, it seems like in previous years, there was always some issue that arose in review. Something like ties between that the reviewer panels didn't want to break, and were there anything sort of unusual about this process in terms of how the reviewers operated compared to the way we hoped that they would do a clean job, I guess.
It was a very clean job this time. There was some heavy discussion between, of course, what is floating up and what is being championed, but there was no issue in the end. People convinced and came to a consensus. There was I don't recall any issue of a doubt in the end, or what you could call is against the consensus. We also, last year, as I recall, we had an unfortunate early investigator who fell out of the time frame by just a smidgen of time, and we had to disallow that project, which was unfortunate. And we checked again this year. Dale checked very thoroughly. And there was one person we had to go to the institution and was cleared up, and it was not an issue. It's just a matter of, what is the title? And they, of course, titles change by institution, and so we don't know. So we had to ask. But that was not an issue.
So in the past, you've solicited inputs on the process and gotten several in the past. Are you soliciting inputs again this year on the process itself?
Well,
Did this change a little bit?
we did ask. We did talked a little bit after the meeting was over, and the thing which came up, of course, is panel expertise, and that's an issue you can't get around because you only have 6 people, and you have 25 people submitting, and some of these things are quite specialized. But that's part of the and it has always been part of the feature of NHARP. Principal investigators have to transmit the idea to an expert in the field who is not really an expert of the specialty. But so that is an issue, and I don't think that's there with small panels and big panels. Because if you have big panels, you have even more people who are different coming in. So,
what is their flexibility in asking for help, for example, and how long do they have in the review process? Once they get the proposal, what is the period of time that they have to actually?
If you look at the timeline,
that's something that would help in this. If they can get someone else to help them. To review these things.
Yeah, they have about 6 weeks.
Well, that's good. Okay.
And we allow them, the review is confidential.
Yes.
But if they have a question they ponder about and they know their colleague down the hall can give input, they're allowed to discuss that and get input.
And they know that.
Yeah, we don't make a big deal about it, but we get asked too. Mm-hmm. People come to us and ask us that.
I think we can encounter that more and more these days. We're supposed to be jacks of all trades, multidisciplinary and all that.
And so the reviewers receive instruction that if they have there's a component of a proposal for which they're seeking subject matter expert input, they understand kind of pulling that question out of the overall proposal. In essence, they're not divulging or talking about the entire proposal as it is. If it's photonics for cancer detection, I'm just making this up, but if it's a photonics question, then they limit it to the photonics question or photonics interaction with tissue. So they receive that kind of guidance.
I don't know if we did that explicitly in the written communication.
Might be worth looking into
do.
that for future competitions, is that to actually explicitly have that, because we all face exactly the same challenge, as Betty Sue said. Mm-hmm. And, having that addressed makes it a lot more comfortable for me as a reviewer.
Right.
Agreed. Yeah.
And it can solve problems if they are criticized. Oh, well, that person or these people didn't know anything about what I was doing. And you can say with confidence that expertise was sought where needed, period. You don't have to be specific, right?
Well, there can arise some IP issues, though. Right? If there's not.
But I think
so that's right. Yeah.
what John mentioned, I think, is really important. If you can abstract what your issues are and you take that, then the entire project is not being revealed.
But I think
that covers
it has to be clear to the reviewers that
Right.
you can't get into IP issues if you're not
Right.
real careful, because they're not the ones on the panel.
Right. And that person may be an expert in something
Yes.
they like to hear.
Yes, right.
So you can't just pass on the entire proposal.
Right.
You have to
Right.
pose a particular question.
I think even particular questions
Right.
maybe, if the particular question was a new idea.
It
You
could
got to be
spoil.
real careful about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Sure.
Have to be very thoughtful about how it's presented to
Yes.
an SME or.
Yeah, that's, I think, why we never have told them that as a general rule. If somebody comes and asks us, and it didn't happen this time, by the way, but we had in previous years people come to us and say, I cannot review this, and then we change it to another reviewer sometimes, even within the panel. But if a person comes and says, I know, can I talk to somebody? We reference the confidentiality at that point.
So one thing I'd highly recommend is that if a reviewer goes to someone external to the panel, because they're not covered under anything, they record that. Record it and what they ask, so that it's recorded and carried with the panel through the process, because I really would worry about IP problems.
Well,
You were getting in trouble, but it's us.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I just said I would highly recommend that if a panelist goes to an outside person outside the panel for expertise, then they need to be very careful, and I would highly recommend that question that's asked outside the panel be recorded and carried with the panel through the process, because IP issues could become a real problem.
Yeah.
so far in all the years that this program has been going, I guess, there's never been a reviewer that gets a proposal and said, well, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and nobody has come forward like that. People have come forward with conflict of interest issues because they knew the person or worked with somebody, and then we work around that, and they abstain from, or they make it clear in the discussion. We ask them to make it clear to your colleagues, and then that has happened. Not this time around.
Were there any reasons provided for why those 3 pre-proposals selected didn't go through for full proposals? Or
Which
out of the 48, 3 did not submit?
we don't know. I mean,
Yeah, they missed the deadlines. Or decided not to do it.
yes,
Always
that's
happens.
All right.
Any comments about this over 20% funding rate? My own comment is that's most PIs, if their odds of success are 1 in 4 on a proposal, they're pretty happy these days.
Yeah. One comment I'd like to make, however, when you start looking the numbers trickling down, it's a painful process for those individuals who are trying to get funded. At the end, you have 11 people who succeeded in the system, but you will never know who else could have been there too as a result of the multiple decisions. And I do think that if this program continues at the same level, I think it has to be an error, either biomedicine or environmental energy and environment. But when you start considering that 269 people attempted to go in competition and at the end only 11 succeeded, okay, it's not a good program in my opinion for the faculty is to go through. Mm-hmm. If you win it, perfect. You're going to get all the glory because it's probably the most competitive program in the country. Right? For the rest of them, they will lose interest.
The amount of effort involved in producing a pre-proposal is considerably smaller than the amount of effort in producing a full proposal. So there are a lot of people that say, well, I'll buy a ticket in this lottery. The cost of my effort is not so great.
Right.
But but I think it's Roberto addresses, I think, a very important issue that in terms of success rates, we need to keep it at least at where the federal programs are, which is about 10%.
Well,
this is starting to look like the DOE Career Award type of situation where it's 3%, and that's not a good marker for us to hit.
Well, I think one of the things that we talked about at the previous meeting was perhaps making this, what do you do with this? Make it a much more prestigious type of accomplishment than it used to be. I mean, when you don't have so much to give and you're trying to be more selective, then make it, toot the horn and beat the drum that
Right.
these are very, very hard to get awards. So, I mean, it's the other side of the coin, Roberto. And I'm with you. It's so frustrating these days, and we've already mentioned reviewers. It's hard to get reviewers for that very same reason, because they're sitting there and they know that even at the NIH study section that maybe one or two grants out of all the ones that they're reviewing at this whole day session are going to get funded, and it's so discouraging. So maybe we should do something else, to make
Something
it
provocative, different.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. But I'm curious, do these folks have funding from other agencies? Have you taken a
Do
look?
they have other funding?
Right.
Yes, they do.
So in reality, you just contribute a little bit to what they're already getting from the federal
And
government.
the reviewers look at other funding as well.
Right,
It's
right.
part of their consideration, how much there is, how little, what kind there is,
Yeah.
and it flows into the deliberation. But of course, they have other funding.
Yeah. Maybe next year, this area is already funded in the state from all federal agencies. In my opinion, maybe we should do something different next year. Maybe fund the social behavioral science or public health, something that this committee has not traditionally funded. And a smaller amount of money might be able to give you a broader impact. I know in some of the areas in the humanities, for example, a $10,000 award is a big award for them. I don't know. It's just for thought.
So going back to the issue of review, we obviously getting some review back from the reviewers about the process. Have we also contacted the PIs who submitted to give us feedback on the process, on what their expectations are?
That's what we get through the merit review, which we'll do this fall.
So that's planned still to happen?
Yes, that's in statute. We have to do it.
Do people have an opportunity to make comments on the website about, their opinion of what happened in the process of this competition?
We don't have an opinion input on the website. That's an interesting idea. I don't know, but. Maybe we have to incorporate that into the merit review. I don't know. Public input, just a big bucket, and have then parse through it somehow. Yeah.
So do you need a motion from the Acorp to approve or endorse this list of awards?
Yes, I would like that a motion that addresses the procedure and the recommendation for the commissioner, so he knows what you think about it. Because this afternoon we'll send him a package with it, and that motion goes in there.
Okay. This is Alan Bowling. I make a motion that we and the Acorp endorses this list of awards.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
So the would it be appropriate to have another motion about the process?
Yes, of course, you can make any motion you like.
So, in other words, saying that the panel has reviewed the process and finds that in terms of the effective utilization of resources and fairness to the individuals, that review is carried out appropriately.
Is that the motion?
Well,
I would support that motion, and Betty Sue Masters.
I second that.
Any discussion on this item?
you have it down. That was a
Panel, the Acorp
yes,
reviewed the
recorded.
process in terms of effective utilization of resources and fairness of the individuals involved, and
Fairness to the individuals. Fairness to the individuals. Proposing.
fairness to the individuals involved.
In proposing, yeah. And fairness to the individuals making proposals.
Oh, make
In other words, we think that for
right.
the applicants, we think are getting a fair shake for their things. I mean, clearly you could argue that you could put more resources into the review, but then there would be less money for the successful proposals. And we think the balance was appropriate.
okay. So let's.
Well, we
put
can
that-
work on the actual wording of that, I guess,
Review
during lunch break or something.
Acorp reviewed the process and found appropriate. Reviewed the process in terms of effective utilization of resources and the fairness to the individuals submitting proposals, and found the process appropriate.
That sounds good.
That sounds
Fine.
good. So is there,
We
And
need to
we need to take the vote, right?
we need to
There,
vote
yeah.
then.
If there's no further discussion, then all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, so we have two.
okay, so then moving on to item 5, and this is getting ready for the merit review of the competition, and so this is actually a different topic. And the competition has to be reviewed on its merits. I mean, the program essentially has to be reviewed on its merits, I believe. Is that correct?
Right. So I don't know why I put consideration on this agenda item, because I don't think you really have anything to consider here. But that's okay. So basically, on the next page, you see the cutout from the statute, and portion A refers to the merit review of the Norman Hackerman Advanced Research Program. And so we have to put together a committee consisting of experts in the research areas to evaluate the program's effectiveness and report its findings to the board by the end of next January. And so what we have done in the previous years with little funding, we did not a site review. We had telephone conferences. We engaged 3 fairly high-level people in academia who are well-versed also in administration. And they interviewed with most of the stakeholders, that is with staff. First, they get a package of background materials for desk review from us, and then they in telephone conferences, they interview with stakeholders like investigators who got funding, investigators who didn't get funding, officers of sponsored project people, Acorp members, staff. I don't know if I leave anybody out. So there's a set of phone calls, and then they write up a couple pages. And I don't know if that much new has come out lately, because the main issue is that funding is tight. But we had some issues, this time they may look at, what is the response to the pre-selection by the institution. Yeah. We had done this before. We did it a little bit different at that time, and because we did the entire proposal selection by the institutions, and that did not sit well with the stakeholders, the award people who submitted the proposals. So this time we did it different. So we'll see what people in the field have to say about it.
So these reviewers are limited to 2 areas that we funded?
Well,
because in the past they've been more general.
It says specified research areas. There's a whole sequence of research areas listed under the NHARP statute.
But we only funded 2 areas.
Right, so we probably will take people from that.
Yeah.
And how it works, I mean, I don't know. We have 3 people in 2 areas, so. But hopefully the people will be at a level flying high enough that the specialty is
especially
less
if you get a
importance.
VP of research or something like that, they're going to be a higher level than just that specific area.
As I recall, the way it was working was that there were one person from industry from Texas, and the other 2 individuals had to be from outside of the state, right? And typically we're academics.
That's what we would try to do, yes.
That was an Acorp decision to do it that way. It's not in the statute, but
no, and the number and the format is not set. So
right. Doesn't say a specific number either.
Well, we want to should the members of Acorp submit names of individuals that would be we think would be suitable for the merit review process? I think we should do that.
So is it possible to reuse reviewers from the past? And can we find out from you how effective some of those might be?
That would be a strategy we could entertain. Yes, we have a
might
list
be
of,
good to get that perspective, at least from one
and we could have we never had a repeat review on the merit review, but maybe it might be useful. And if somebody's willing to do it again, maybe from way back, somebody, if in
the good old days.
We can give you it's a limited list of sure. people we have, because for a couple of years we also did the report, and for 2 years we did ATP and ARP. We had a whole report done.
Right.
So when we say Texas industry, that would include like the medical industry, like someone at a large hospital?
Yes.
I mean, that'd be more industry than research.
Presumably it would be somebody either, I would be sort of thinking it'd be somebody in the energy environment or somebody in medical industry. Those fields cover a lot of different kinds of things. So we should.
Well, it should be industry which is involved in research, obviously.
But you're looking for generalists, right? And this merit review is for the entire NHARP rather than just the 2 areas. And they're not going to look at the specific projects that were picked here or selected in this process. They're going to tell us and be our sort of I shouldn't say mouthpiece, but they'll be our communicators to the external world about the benefits of this program.
Right.
And I think we need to ensure that these are people who are of that standing, irrespective of area. And I would prefer that, and this is my personal preference, that we look for people outside of the two areas that we have focused on, in fact, in this particular program, because of where we want to probably go in the future.
That's a good idea, actually.
I think that is a good idea. So, when if we're going to submit names to you, when you need them?
We will do this sometime in the fall, I assume. I don't have it scheduled in, but we have to do it in the fall because the people, in the summer it's a problem getting people are not there on campus and so on.
Right.
So now, in the past, I think it's been helpful after we get the top choices for this merit review committee, for someone who knows them to ask them very nicely if they would like to do it, because it's reaching out a staff member from higher education coordinating board might be less persuasive than having an academic that they know and presumably respect asking them to do this job.
Actually, when you look at the statute in the law, it is very clear to me that these two paragraphs were written for the ARP, ATP, when they were at the $20 million level. I think we gotta keep that in mind. For example, paragraph B, I believe, no longer applies since there is no ATP anymore.
Well, there is ATP is still there. It's just not funded.
It's not funded. So why would we be evaluating that unless we are going to use that argument to increase the funding? But what I would do, for example, given the limitations on funding, if I like to get an evaluation of programs, typically, and if I like to get independence in their opinions, I would hire an independent evaluator that would just look at the data, look at the effectiveness with respect to what has been funded. And then that person or group of individuals could then present the information so you can then have somebody to review at the scientific level. That's what I would, if I were to do it on my campus, that's what I would do.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes.
So regarding the term effectiveness, are we supposed to be looking at the effectiveness of the funded projects and what they have yielded subsequent to funding, or in the previous cycles, or are we looking at process here, effectiveness of process? That's not clear to me.
Yeah, agreed.
This is Stacy Silverman. I'm going to chime in. This is actually about the process that the coordinating board uses in order to do the program. So it's not actually for the scientific merit of what was funded.
Okay. So nothing to do with, so for example, if investigator X was funded a cycle and a half ago or 2 cycles ago, we're not looking at what he or she has produced since then to look at the effectiveness of this program, where those monies have been invested, so to speak. That's not what we're asking here.
That's correct. What we want the merit reviewers to do is to take a look and see if we followed what we were supposed to do in terms of the RFA and in terms of issuing the RFA and making sure that the evaluation process went off appropriately and that the tools are in place for the reviews to be conducted. So,
well, I would like to sort of push on this a little bit because it does say to evaluate the technology program's effectiveness. Now, again, this was technology. That's where this is getting really fuzzy. But it would seem to me that a merit review would be very much better if it did look to see what the long-term effectiveness of this program has been. and where it's gone, and that to me is a merit review.
Well, now, these merit review things are sent to the legislature, aren't they?
Actually, they are given to the coordinating board.
Okay.
That's it. And actually, the merit review for the research areas, for the research programs, is actually under A. B
Yeah,
is-
right. Effectiveness, though. It
Right.
does say
B
effectiveness.
is the advanced technology, which is not
Yeah, I read
in
that wrong.
existence.
Yeah.
So we agree that advanced technology is not on this, but this merit review is not confidential, right? It's public record. Okay. So that if the legislature wanted to know how effective the program is, I don't think it would be very interested in the procedures.
Yes, I get you.
They want to know that's done for them lately.
So where has the investment
They're going to want to
gone?
know who applied, where they were, and who got funded. That's
They
what
don't,
want
they
to
don't
know.
care anything at all about, is this program worth having? Should
Oh,
this program
absolutely.
be funded at all?
That's not what this report is about. So that is outside the purview of this particular report.
I think you have a problem with the wording there. When it says effectiveness of the
Yeah.
program,
Right.
there is a judgment on whether or not the results
Effective.
of the program are doing anything.
It's called outcomes assessment.
I think you have to keep that in mind.
And if you move further up in that clause, it says consists of experts in the specified research areas,
Right.
which would seem to drive at.
That's why I asked the question whether or not it was the two areas that we funded, because the assessment is being made for the previous year. And so we only funded two areas, and they're asking for experts that know something maybe about, at least understand what those two research areas are, and then it asks for the effectiveness of that
Right.
program. Now, they can't make a judgment on the effectiveness because the program just started on that previous year, but they can say, well, it looks like the programs that were funded will lead to good results, and they can at least say that. So they need to know something.
Absolutely. And they will have the abstracts of all the
Right.
the proposals.
And they're going to talk to some of these people too, right?
Absolutely. At least the last time we did this, when folks came in, we actually had folks who had been funded, folks who had not been funded, and tried to give them, kind of hit the highlights of, the really exemplary projects. I know we have some glowing examples of things that led to NIH funding or other.
And that was the reason we went in and did the assessment overall the program several years ago, and said these programs were very good, and they resulted in these results, which got an ROI on the investment and so
Right.
forth.
Exactly.
That's why we did that, and that was fed to the people that did the assessment at the time. So we can't do that because we don't have the funding again to do it. But I think at least the people that come and do this assessment, I think, should be on the areas that we funded the previous year.
I agree.
And then they should make an assessment on that, or the projects that were put on this, that were done by the panels, are they really going to lead to an effective program that with this amount of money? And of course, the money's low.
And from the previous merit reviews, we have gotten really great suggestions for streamlining, especially given the focus on early investigator, that recommendation, and whether or not we limit the number of pre-proposals, whether we have that process, and that's been very helpful, I think.
But
especially
that's just
when-
one function of the
Right.
this assessment team.
It's usually a day-long event, so get lots of input.
To expect them to measure effectiveness is unfair, right? In that
But
you
that's
can't.
what I just said. I said they can't do
They can't
a
do
measure,
that.
but they can say these programs that were determined by the panel to be, they will lead to an effective program. They don't know because they haven't been done yet.
But then the program itself has been in place. The ARP program has been in place for 20 years.
I think
Why? And I don't see anywhere in this that it needs to be on the specific research programs that were just funded,
Well, I think
but on
that's
the
what
overall research program, because that's the way I'm looking at it and saying, Part A is looking at the ARP program, Part B is looking at the ATP program, and it's the entire program over the history of it.
Well, no,
and-
I think the A is talking about the previous year that was funded and the areas that were funded.
Correct.
I think that's what it's looking at, and I think that's what the panel ought
Right.
to do. Next year, we may change the areas, and they'll be on some
Although,
other. If it was over the whole thing, fine, but it's
So,
not.
so the way I see it, it's a little bit of a catch-22, but you have the product and you have the process.
right.
And effectiveness to me equals product.
Yep.
And process means how we went about doing it, and did we do the right things? Did we make the right decisions in doing this under extreme circumstances? And I think everybody agrees that those were extreme circumstances.
Right.
So we need to have someone with that perspective, but they also have to know something about the areas that were covered.
But all they can
And
do
that
in
can,
Part B
that's
is
not
put-
so hard to do.
Okay, so I think you also need to add the investment upfront.
Yes.
You got the investment, the product, and the processes. Okay? So when you look at the investment upfront, it's a direct measure of the effectiveness. Okay? You started 60,
You're right.
16, $1 million. Okay, that on its own is really the given indication of the effectiveness. Okay, so what we're trying to do is digress to the very little that has been funded. And yes, I do recommend that if you all want to continue using the same process, you should, the way you've done it. But I do agree with Ren that you need to look what was funded, because you don't see outcomes of projects immediately. You see it after the project is funded based on publications or additional funding, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I think we're all in agreement on this thing that and it's just a matter of what the charge for this committee ought to be.
Right.
Well, it's more. I would say it's just more than the process. It's
Right.
beyond that. It's effectiveness on the Part A and Part B. All you can put is NA, right? We don't
Right,
even-
right, yeah.
Don't have product, exactly.
It's just NA.
Wording's the same, but it's,
So, I noticed that this is only odd-numbered years that this merit review is. So clearly, this has something to do with the future of the program. And so, from the point of view of making sure that the program has a future, it's probably wise to focus a lot on outcomes.
I think these reviewers ought to point out in the review that there were limited areas funded by choice of the Acorp, and that if future funding increases back, more areas will be funded. And then next year, maybe different areas will be funded instead of the two that were funded this year. So they should bring all that out in their review.
Agreed.
Hopefully.
That would be ideal.
well, there was a feeling, I think, at one time with some folks that I have talked to that this was a unique program and that they wish that their states had such a program. And maybe that's another way of selling it to the legislature is, that it's unique, Texas likes to be unique.
Oil prices are up.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
So anyway, we will try to send some names, potential candidates, or how they can be reached. And when you select names, when you select people to be on the merit review, we need to have, it would be wise to get the person who suggested them to try to talk them into taking the job. Because most people, I find it incredibly hard to get reviewers. And so it's usually a personal touch helps to persuade somebody that, oh, yes, I should take the time to do this, learn about this.
So I'll get in touch with you. If I was told by BJ on the side that the folks on the phone, if you can mute your phone, our IT people can crank the volume up a little bit because there's no the feedback issue. And we were told to speak more up to the microphone, so it's both things. So I will get in touch with you, and I will tell you the list. I will give you a summary of the people we had before, and these. And I can also give you the links to the previous merit reviews, so you can review what has been said before. That might be an interesting exercise as well. They're not long. They're just 3-4 pages long, normally.
Is it worth thinking about someone out of an agency like the EPA? Environmental?
Or NIEHS.
Or either one?
Yeah, that would be great. And
Sorry?
those.
Both would be preferable. I think that'd be great if we could.
Yeah, like getting somebody from the EPA, it's hard for us because it's very hard to get the contacts from, or the same with industry. It's they're not as open as academic people.
Actually, there is a very strong scientific community in the EPA in Texas. If you look at, there is. So.
Would you like somebody from a national lab? I can try and get someone.
Pardon me?
Somebody from the national lab.
That's a possibility too, because we typically have reviewers for NHARP from the national labs. We didn't have it this time because they're also not that easy to get, and fewer in percentage, of course, for the reviewers. I think our lunch boxes are there. What time is it?
12:30.
12:30. Maybe we should.
So what do we do with the folks on the phone? Are you ready to eat lunch?
I'm always ready to eat.
Me too.
Yeah,
So are we going to work during
you're going to
lunch?
continue working, right?
Yes.
Through lunch. So,
Yes.
Yeah, let's just do it.
Yeah, we can continue talking while we have lunch, or we can break. It depends on what you. Let's continue. The consensus.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
yes, I would like. I have to leave a
Which-
little early, so.
Okay, we just get our boxes.
Yeah.
Internal audits.
Right, that's the next agenda item. As you may recall, our grant conditions require that institutions who receive an award audit these awards once in a cycle. And we have instructions for that on our website. And so once a year, we typically bring you audit issues which came up in the previous year. Now, it came to our attention just recently that our agency has a new rule that's in the Texas Administrative Code, which I printed on the following page, and which instructs us that we shall eliminate requirements of institutions to conduct audits of funds administered by the board, as defined in the subsection. So, as I read this at the moment, is that we can't require specific audits for specific programs anymore, but that our internal auditor will work with institutions to audit funds according to risk. That's how I read this. And so we will have to work with our counsel's office in a short time, because we may have to strike out of our RFA the audit requirement before we make contracts, because the RFA is part of the contract. And at the same time, then alert our internal auditor that NHARP funded grants are part of funded funds from the coding board, and that the internal auditor has to look after these audits. I don't know, in the overall scheme of things, and I'm sure it is designed, the new rule, that there is no duplication of effort. It makes it harder for us for our staff monitoring the awards, what is going on. Obviously, because we won't get these audits fairly regularly. The audits in the past years I've been involved with this have never resulted in something really very drastic in terms of findings. It is mostly concerned with management of timeliness of submitting things. It's concerned with citations and maybe some funds which were misplaced, in the wrong category, like the one we have at the second instant here today from MD Anderson. There are some funds which have not been under observation too, which have been identified with payroll, etc. And sometimes these issues can be worked out because the institution can rectify the issue and no harm is done. And nothing even has to be returned. Sometimes it leads to some returned funds. So it's generally useful as an observation from the staff perspective that it keeps everybody aware of this and keeps it running smoothly. And that's.
Is there a statute? Is there a statute requirement of the state universities that they perform audits?
I'm sure there are. I can't tell you what the statute is and what regulates that. I'm sure there are. I mean, the system, the institution or the systems have dedicated audit offices which put these NR audits on their schedule, typically.
Right. In regard to that question, all institutions are subject to state audits. Mm-hmm. And the most famous is what they call the A133 audit, which all institutions get very scared, nervous, and prepare all the financials. But I do think it's a duplication of effort. If for every one NHARP an institution might have, there might be other 20 grants from the federal level that are subject to the same level of auditing requirements.
Okay.
So.
But A31, that's federal grants. Mm-hmm. So are NHARP...
The state office, the state auditing office is the one that does it.
But does NHARP awards fall under that? Because they're state appropriated funds.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, but they're all using the same processes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I as I said, the larger view I haven't been involved with, and so we have to work with we have an internal auditor who works with the institutions, obviously, so we have to work with him on this now. So that is the update, my update, and in the last half year, there were basically, we received 2 audits, and they're reprinted here. And the first one had no findings, and the second one I pointed out to you.
So the programs are getting audited somewhere? There was just duplication is the reason for this? I'm a little confused on how they're audited and where. And why don't you get that information? Can't you just get the information from that audit?
Well, that's what this is supposed to be, I think, and our internal auditor is supposed to orchestrate that in tandem with the institutions.
After it's been done.
Yeah, and I'm sure if they do something, that we will hear that in the end. But we are removed from that as staff. On the other hand, if it is done twice, that's not good. So I don't know.
Does the timing of that in any way interfere with what timing that you would have to have for any reporting that you have to do?
We don't put a timing on there. They're free to put it on their schedule as they like. The only thing is that we asked for them to put it on their schedule before when we gave no-cost extensions, they had to tell us that it was put on the schedule. It didn't even actually have to be finished.
Well, I guess my question is, someone may come back to you and say, okay, what have you been doing? Have you been distributing funds responsibly? Show us what you've done. And if you were to go back to the previous biennium, could you do that in a timely manner based on this kind of arrangement?
Well, I'm sure if the internal auditor works. I mean, I don't know how the auditing office will work it out because that's based on risk and
right.
et cetera. So I cannot answer that.
Well, we can't act on this because it's done. So.
Yeah.
This Rule 1.13. Rule 1.13 is something that only a lawyer can read. Understand? It's not on my pay grade.
Right.
Well, we're just supposed to look at this. Is there any action that we need to take regarding agenda item 6?
No, I don't see that there's action necessary for you.
So when is the next sort of report review of this, what we've done this year, going to the board, and when do we appear before the board, we meaning Bob or a representative of us? I think that gets into the next discussion of future meetings and agendas and so on.
Right.
So how do we prepare for that and when?
Okay, yeah, that's agenda item 7. As you see on the page, I put together 4 bullets which came to my mind. And the first one is the June Committee on Academic and Workforce Success, the CAUSE meeting. And that's the meeting of the board with a subset of people of the board, where much of the items that go before the board are discussed in detail and considered, and then they go a month later to the full board.
Right.
And so we put on the agenda for that meeting, June 25th, and I had emailed with Dr. Curl that he could speak to the board at that time. And the awards have been made by then because the board had allowed us that the commissioner can make the awards. So it will be an updating item. They don't have to consider the awards at that time.
Okay.
But and as you see from the, I printed, those are also new rules for advisory committees. that actually the advisory committee chair people should report to the board once a year. So this would be the time for that. And so Dr. Carl can discuss the awards and bring issues forward according to the statute to the board and talk about that.
Does this require a written report?
No, it does not require a written report. It's an oral report.
And I noticed that this cause committee is different from the committee that I talked to in the past.
Well, at some point in time, it was renamed. So it's now I forget it has a new name, and they reorganize who's actually on it because we have different divisions and so on.
Well, this other one was some sort of called research and.
Yeah, what was the name? I forget the name now. It was so hard to learn cause, and now I forgot the other name. Yes, it was differently parceled up within the agency. Oh, which divisions?
Well,
but it's basically a subset of people from the board members, a subset of board members which have special interest in academic and workforce success. And research falls under academic and workforce success.
Yeah, I guess the other committee did have, or subcommittee, had a research in its title, didn't it?
I don't know.
Do you remember, Bob? That the previous committee had research in its title?
I think it did. I thought it had research in its title, but it was more one of their main concerns. Well, I can't remember exactly what this was called. There was some initiative that the Higher Education Board had, Way to Be Great or something. I can't remember either. I could look it up, but I can't remember.
Is it closing the gaps?
Well,
may have been.
Well, closing the gaps is a strategy, which is not a committee. It's a strategy.
Well, I guess the concern is hidden under these questions is de-emphasis of research, which I think we're seeing not only in the state of Texas, but all over the United States. We expect a lot of research in this country, but we don't want to pay for it. And so I guess what I would worry about is that these people need to really know what research is about and how important it is to every aspect of this state. And if they want to focus on economy, they can focus on that, right? If they want to focus on education, superior education, then they need to talk about research. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, my preaching's over.
So yeah, so this is time to talk to them, and you can decide how you want to do that. I know last time we had a slide which was put up where we had a funding history on it and so on. We also had a principal investigator come and talk. Or did we have somebody here, Phil? We were thinking maybe we could do that.
Sarah Sawyer was on the slide.
She was on the slide, but not here in person.
I don't think she was.
Yeah, we could, we could invite an investigator to talk if you like that.
As I recall, the meeting goes on all day that I went to. This committee meeting went on all day, and they had all sorts of matters to discuss that involved much larger amounts of money. And when I actually had a chance to speak to them about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I sort of figured that 2 minutes was about the maximum that they wanted to hear, maybe 3. So it's just a brief moment to sort of remind people of what this is about and give some indication about why we think it's worthwhile. So,
yeah, the meeting is typically in 2 parts, and we had the way it is now. It's in 2 parts, and our division is in the afternoon. Exactly when we don't know, but what we did this time is because now all committees report to the board through the chairperson. And so we put all the committee reports at the beginning of our section. So it should be ideally early afternoon. But
well, I wasn't complaining. I thought it fascinating to find out all the things that.
It was a little bit unfortunate the last time and sometimes this happens if something comes up which holds them up, then everything is delayed and so on. Especially they have a discussion section in the morning with a topic, and so you never know what happens. But yeah, it is a few minutes, I mean, it's not, but it
like
can
going
be,
before a legislative committee.
but it can be, it's less, not quite as formal, and, it can be more substantial than that. So we can have slides, if you like something written, we can do that. And if you like to invite an investigator, and we can maybe to testify, if you think that you would like to include that, we can do that too.
I think a success story would be very good. I have a feeling it is like testifying before Congress, if you have some anecdote or something that really hits home, it's a superb example of success of the program. That would be good. But also, to strongly make the point that this program needs to grow to make it really effective. And that word effectiveness keeps coming back in my mind and flashing back. Effectiveness means investment in the process, in the program.
Well, the reports on all the funded grants are on the web, right on the higher education website. So.
We have progress reports posted on the website, yes.
So we could peruse the reports and try to find. We could peruse these reports and try to find the best story.
Well, one thing I wonder about is because, we're trying to make the point that they should invest more than is being invested at this point. I do wonder if we gave a listing of perhaps accomplishments when $60 million was going into the program versus accomplishments when $1 million,
right,
plus a success story. I mean, certainly we need to show, yes, we can get successes, but with $60 million, we get so much more out of that.
Right. Well, that's a good point. The problem is always, how do you measure success? And what do we emphasize? Publications.
Well, the state might view that in terms of how much more dollars came into the state because the state invested.
Right. And when we had that review done, that was one of the things, not only the economic return, but also the fact that it brought in more federal grants to the state. Or at least seeded
them. The multiplier evaluated already, those are all available. I don't think that multiplier has changed significantly over the years, and that might probably take too much work to figure out how it's changed with time, but we have a good estimation as to what that is. I think it's 9 to 1 or something like that. Or was the leveraging?
This
Yeah,
program
something
was-
like that.
Was always sort of 6 to 1.
Yeah.
And it is a multiplier, of course, so if you have less funding, it multiplies less. So
I think the problem here is that when we were ATP and ARP, ATP was a little easier to justify in some ways. ARP, the runway's much longer. And
Right.
It's much harder to justify. It may be better to go back several years and look at the ARP programs that were done, say, in the mid-90s and so forth, and see how they've turned out, because you need a 10 to 15-year runway to ever understand what research really does.
How far back in time are the grant reports have?
I'm not sure all the
2001, I think. Just whenever everything became electronic.
Okay.
What year was
2001. Oh, that's a bit precise.
Well, we will be in communication in June, early June, to get ready for this.
Okay.
So,
Maybe the other possibility is to just ask the institutions if they have knowledge of outstanding success stories. And if they do, then that helps the process of...
Hard to drag it out of them, but in a short time frame. But worth trying.
Worth asking.
Mm-hmm. We can work through the OSP.
You should have the data, though, that is submitted through the transparency report, Dale, of all the grants coming to the institutions. So you should know, for example, if there has been a recipient of NHARP award, the coordinated board should have already all the other awards that person has received if that person is the PI, correct?
the results, presumably somewhere the reports before 2001 are on file here, I assume, the ones that are not on the web. In some dusty file cabinet somewhere.
They're electronic too, but they're not in a database form.
They're just documents.
Not searchable.
Right.
Yeah, all the dusty file cabinets were scanned at some time. So the second bullet is the Coordinating Board's legislative appropriation request. You may remember that from 2 years ago. So our agency has to make an LAR, as it's called, and it's there's actually for us there's a due date May 30th, but it's a process which goes on over the summer. But basically, it's fairly straightforward because you make a baseline request, which is the same as last biennium's. So that said, you actually, I didn't put this on here, you also are requested to make a 5 and 10% reduction request, but that's not necessarily by item, but it's by so it's shifted across initiatives. So, for example, last biennium, the scenarios with 5 and 10% reduction did not take 5 or 10% out of the $1 million for NHARP. It was taking out of a bigger pot. Yeah, because the 5% out of 1 million wouldn't have made much difference. So it wasn't, it's not across the board. But and this year, if things stay as they are, we probably won't face the 5 and 10% reduction scenarios as the couple of years before, where we did. And that's why I didn't put this on here. But we have a baseline request, which is the same as last time, which is $1 million. And then the agency can put exceptional item requests. And as the agency did last time, that will most likely be $8 million.
How's that?
Or
process?
plus 7, baseline plus 7.
Cornelius, that process is that I'm assuming that the THCCB will be preparing the LARs for all the functions of the THCCB.
Yes.
Correct. Having done this for the university, I also understand that you can have flexibility to shuffle funds around. Correct. So what you're saying is that the THCCB, the leadership and the coordinating board, has already decided to submit the LAR at $1 million, correct?
It does not have decided anything on it yet because it has. There's. I don't know the exact process, but it hasn't been decided yet. That's the number I saw. I don't know if that is the case. You can make a recommendation to the agency what you think should be, you would like to see.
Is it time to do it now, or would it be in the next June meeting?
No, the time is now, because the decision will come up soon. And if you make a consideration about this, either about the baseline or the exceptional item, I can forward it up the line to the commissioner. That's why I put this on here.
Which is the best strategy? And I think one of the problems has been what Roberto is referring to is where we end up on the priority list as far as the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board request is concerned. And we would like to be higher on that priority list. So that's one thing. But if we were to ask if the baseline request should be, this is a question, if the baseline request should be increased, or if we took a strategy of an exceptional item request, saying there are areas that we have totally ignored in the research portfolio, that these are things that we feel are very important, and you've mentioned a couple. I mean, let's bring these back on the table, because we had to restrict this very much to meet that $1 million restriction. So can we make that our special item, exceptional item request? Is that the best strategy? I'm asking this as a question. I really have no clue as to how to do this, but I think we need to go in full force and say this program can be so much more effective, using their words, than it is if we just had some funding to do this, and we are ignoring certain areas of research.
Right, that's why I put this bullet on here. That's what you can do. And the ranking, I don't think, was low last time. I think this NHUB was ranked number 3 or something.
Okay,
and before, ahead of it were the scholarship funding. And they will always be number 1, 2, and 3, or whatever they are.
Right.
There is no, that's just
That's what it
the
is.
main business of the agency.
Well, it seems like on these requests, it'd be better to have a balance between the exceptional and the baseline. And I would suggest that the baseline really go into a request that's, say, $4 million or something, and then an exceptional request of $4 million, and have a little more balance. Because when you go in with an exceptional request that's 9 times the baseline, I think it's probably going to be ignored. But if you go in with a baseline, saying the baseline's better to have it at this range,
exactly what
then
I'm
we can
getting
go
at.
this
Yeah.
to
Great.
do some of the programs.
And the issue is that if you want to increase the baseline, what it does is competing against other programs from the THCB.
Right.
And so I think we have to try both.
And the other thing I think is that we need to definitely find a way to get the TD&T side of the ATP TD&T part of it back on the table, because with where the national scene is going, with all the advanced manufacturing initiatives coming forward, we're not going to be competitive. And in order to be competitive, we need to have those kinds of seed grants here.
Actually, the two things. The argument was always made that, and that's not to negate what you said, that there are other funding streams in Texas for the
technology development.
Yeah, and also there was a statute change. So actually, if you look from the last session, Acorp can, if it has funds, it can put funds into ATP. It was with $1 million. It was just not something to do.
That's one project.
So if you look at the statute, and by the way, we updated our website. If you go to the THECB website and /NHARP, you go directly to NHARP website, and there is a link for rules and statutes, and I just put in links for all the portions of the rules and statutes, so it's very easy to read now. So there is the statute changed, and you can read that up there in terms of funding.
So I didn't realize that there was discretion to move money into ATP.
Yeah, the way I read it, that's there's some discretion now.
One thing we might think about is that, of course, we're primarily funding the ARP, but we might think of some kind of neat award. It's $1 million award for the ATP part, and make it a really classy award so it gets a little exposure, but it makes it very hard to get it. And use the other base funding in ARP. But if you could get something like 8 or 9 million.
Right, if you have some funds to work with.
But use the ATP as really a really classy award.
So it says this baseline request of $1 million in hyphen always the same as previous appropriation.
That's my experience. So Dr. Azevedo just said that, and I mean, an agency can do, I think, what it wants to do. But
Well, it went through this dip. Maybe it's time to start pushing it up, but you don't push it up 19 million at a time. Push it up to 4 as a baseline, and then do exceptional projects on top of that. Maybe try and get another 4 and get it up to 8 or 9, and really go from
this. The problem is that I don't think this is our decision to make.
We can certainly make a recommendation.
We can recommend, and we should recommend that it goes up, that the baseline may go up to 4, but whether
it's all a recommendation, and even the agency LAR is a recommendation, as you know from last biennium, that the outcome was different.
So I'm going to have to interrupt and clarify just a couple of things. While the statute was changed to allow some movement around, the actual appropriations bill provided a line item to support ARP, actually in HARP. So there is no discretion at moving money around. If the legislature wishes to appropriate money, they may do so.
That means it needs to be a request up front too.
Absolutely. Additionally, this body may make a recommendation directly to the board. So you may provide a letter, you may provide a person, you may direct staff to make that recommendation, but your recommendation will go directly to the board. That was a statutory change last legislative session. So I just wanted to make that clarification as well.
Good to know.
Good to know.
How would it be appropriated if, I mean, the statute says there is a discretion between ARP and NHARP and ATP. How would it be appropriated, or how would it show up in the appropriation if that discretion is given?
It would have to be a line item that doesn't just say NHARP or whatever that it needs to have direction in the Appropriations Act that accurately reflects the program.
So, okay, we're talking about Acorp recommending that the baseline request go up to $4 million. And with an exceptional item request of another $4 million.
I think that's up to this group to make that recommendation. I think that's great. Thanks.
Well, it's just
But we
to get
need
more
to justify,
balance.
yeah, we need to fill it out and
No, we
justify
have to write
exactly.
a letter.
Would that go, if the committee would consider this today, how would that go forward? I mean, the board meeting is not quite now. It's in a while, and the LAR is being discussed. Or is it? How does the timing work out, Stacey?
Well, I clearly hear the information from you, so I will pass it along. And right now, in the development of our LAR as an agency, that message will go forward. Your direction from this committee to the board may go to the board during their July board meeting, if you so wish. So, and there's always public testimony as well, so which is outside the recommendation of Acorp. But your official committee recommendation can go directly to the board for their consideration in July.
I recommend that we put together a letter of some kind that asks for a baseline shift from over $1 million to whatever number I think we need to conclude on. I think 4 might be too low. I think we need to go something like 8 with a potential exceptional item request for a technology-related grant for about $2 million, which I think would, because of where the enterprise fund as well as where the emerging technology funds are likely to go in the next legislative session, I think it's time that this be put back on the legislative agenda, that the technology program should perhaps be administered through THECB and through the Acorp.
I will let you know that yesterday the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Higher Ed looked at or asked the LBB to provide them with information about the different research funding methods that are out there that are provided to the institutions. And there was very brief discussion of the NHARP program, that it exists, and the question was raised, because there are so many different programs, is that a good thing? So the legislature is interested in understanding the different funding streams and why they're important and unique.
Okay. Well, our main feature is outside reviews, peer reviews outside the state, with pretty strict adherence to the recommendations of the final reviews. So effectively, what I'm trying to say is it's a clean program. And in this current environment, I think there's something to be said, some advantage to running a clean program.
And I think that's where it was with the TD&T program, the ATP program, the ARP programs. They had very little external interference in terms of the way the money was distributed, the outcomes were measured, and I think going back to that is perhaps the right thing for the state to consider. And given the fact that the next legislative session is going to be under a very different climate, it perhaps is worthwhile for this committee to state where we started from, all the positives that came out of that $60 million going into those 3 programs, and recommending that we go back to that type of a program. And provide one stop, in that this was the only place where research and technology were funded across the state. And I think that was an important place for providing clarity, rather than having multiple buckets and multiple acronyms distributing money.
Well, I mean, one thing we can show is basically how federal funding is basically going down. I think that's important, perhaps a graphic or something that we could show. I think it's also important to remind them that basically we are a state with basically three, considering the size of the state, we have 3 Tier 1 institutions. California has a whole lot more than we do. If we're going to do something about some of these emerging research universities, we can't rely upon the federal government to take care of them. We in Texas are going to have to do it, and through this program is one of them, provided we make sure the funding gets to some of these emerging research universities.
I think these are all excellent points, and we need to really formulate a very strong letter that incorporates these ideas and these facts that, you know, people ignore. I'm happy to supply some graphic information on at least the NIH funding picture, and I think I can get one that's pretty clear for NSF, for example, to show what's happening federally.
Or even DOD, I'm sure that's fairly easy to get. That's all.
Yes, you can go on the websites and get them. But we can put something together, I think, that would be very, very graphically clear as to what's happening. And maybe that will sort of feed into the Texas pride as well, that, okay, we can do something about this. We can do it right. And let's try that.
Ramana, was yours a motion? You made that as a motion?
I'm happy to make it into a motion.
And you want to restate it?
That this committee the motion I propose that this committee put a strong letter in place to the coordinating board that places significant resources back into the ARP program, the NHARP program, as well as fund the ATP and the technology transfer programs.
And you mentioned 2 numbers before. Do you want to include that as a part of your motion?
I think that's up for us to discuss, unless I think we should discuss that. So as to what number it should be.
The number you used was $8 million for the baseline for ARP and $2 million for ATP.
If I'm going the whole way, I'd go back to the $60 million. So it's $20 million for NHARP, 20 for ATP, 20 for the technology transfer, and that way you'll have a single place where all of it is administered in the state.
I do.
A peer review.
Perhaps
with the peer review process, exactly.
Perhaps I shouldn't mention this in the middle of the motion, but one thing I wonder about is whether we should identify some areas that instead of just fine, they want more money, but what is it that they want to fund? Why is it so important to Texas? Aside from the federal funding going down, and yes, we want more we want more Tier 1 institutions, but what kind of science is it going to drive? What kind of technologies are going to drive? I think we maybe need to identify some more, so it isn't quite so we've got some more substance behind it.
And another point we could make in that letter is that actually having these funds in this one locus also actually helps with recruiting faculty to the state.
Oh, yeah.
Question
there's
about
a big push against, they sort of robbed Peter to pay Paul originally with the taking the $60 million away over time. And I think there's going to be a real pushback on the Emerging Technology Fund and so forth, trying to take it down, putting it under something else. And even though we've suggested that a long time ago, that it would be better to be under a peer-reviewed process than the process they used, but I think there's going to be a lot of pushback. I'm a little more in the frame of mind, you got to take a little smaller step first, and then go after the bigger when you prove things. That's why I suggested really do an ATP project that's really first class. And do one and show that it works good and really pick the right project and maybe take smaller steps in terms of ARP, because ARP is less understood than anything else.
But right now, I think with the next legislative session, this is just something. I'm not sure that either of those programs will have any funding. If they go into something new, then it makes these programs irrelevant. And I think this is the time, if you will, to regain the position for these 2 programs that have been shunned.
Yeah, I mean, you can
because we've had a great track record for those programs. Demonstrating that track record, the fact that it's peer reviewed, there was no controversy associated with those programs in terms of how it is selected, how the outcomes of it. I think that's a winning card for you.
Well, one of the things that seems to be attractive to politicians in general is the notion of focus. Well, the CPRIT, the Emerging Technology Program, Emerging Technology was focused on developing innovative industry in the state, and the CPRIT, we're going to cure cancer. One of the problems that ARP and ATP have had is there's no focus. The focus is we're going to support research and higher education rather than we're going to aim for some goal. So I guess the question that we need to consider is what is the appropriate way to go? Should we identify some areas that we think would have real focus on something that has some supposed impact?
So the two things that are currently funded at a substantial level in the state are water and cancer. Outside of those, there is no substantial funding. So just about every other problem area that you want to think about needs funding. And you don't know where the most significant challenges the state is going to face over the next 20 years are going to be at this point. I think we can all crystal ball some ideas. We can say energy is certainly one that's going to be there. Environment is going to be another one. Biomedical is going to be another one. But beyond that, I think over the next 20-year horizon, we'd be hard-pressed to identify topics. But I think those would be all places where there will be jobs, where there will be economic development that's associated with the research. And I think those are places that I think we should target. So everything except water and cancer.
Well, one thing for which there's not so much federal funding, at least at this point, there probably will be before too long, but because we're now number one in terms of natural gas, we could do some ask for some funding to do some fundamental important science related to fracking.
And that I would put in the bucket of energy. And the other big one that I think where the state is going to need to focus a lot more energy is going to be in infrastructure. Federally, we are in a big infrastructure deficit. Locally and statewide, we're in a huge infrastructure deficit. And that's the place where if we're going to focus our target in terms of 5, 10, 15-year targets, those will be the places I look. So energy, environment, biomedical, infrastructure.
Yeah, I appreciate all the comments, but realistically, we only have $1 million. That's the bottom line, and I think if we want to be effective, Stacy, there is a due date of May 30th, correct, for the LARs to be submitted. That's internal, or?
I believe that's internal because our board. It actually will go to our board in July for their consideration, but the earlier you all will get your letter to us, the better off.
So if we give you a letter for recommending the coordinating board to consider an LAR for X number of dollars, am I in the assumption that you would then be able to prepare the LAR form and present it to the board?
Certainly your recommendation would go to the board. That would not necessarily be the commissioner's recommendation to be included in the LAR.
Okay, so how does the commissioner feel about all this?
I have not had a discussion with him about this.
Would you be willing to have a discussion with him and share the opinions, or maybe Robert is for you too?
Absolutely, yes. The opinion that you all are giving us right now as staff will certainly be shared with our leadership.
All right, so a reasonable motion is for recommendation for the coordinating board to work on an LAR request for ARP or ATP for X number of dollars. Correct?
It's fine. If that's your recommendation to us, we will certainly move forward with that. I will say that generally speaking, the LAR comes out with the baseline budget, so it will have $1 million in there.
Right.
I'm assuming that. I have not seen it. Now, our leadership will be asked to do a 5% reduction and a 10% reduction, generally speaking, across the board. We'll see how that plays out additionally. I just want you to know what the realities are with.
So the LAR is not a good realistic scenario that the NHARP will increase. Could it be?
It would be an exceptional item to our existing legislative appropriations
Okay.
request. So in that exceptional item funding, which I believe we asked for additional funding last time around for ARP or NHARP, which I need to call it NHARP. So I can't recall what it was that we asked for last time, but I know it was an exceptional item in our LAR. And
Bob,
it
do
was.
you remember that amount?
I don't know that.
What went
I don't
forward?
remember right. I was thinking, I thought the exceptional item might have been to have it funded at $8 million.
That sounds like what it most likely would have been, because we would have wanted to go back to where we were previously.
Right.
So that seems
Which is
like
not
a
an
reasonable
unreasonable
approach.
request to go back to where we
Absolutely.
were
I think we
several
should
years
go back.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we know what happened
So
at
are
the
you saying
legislature.
Well, actually,
legislative.
of course-
Baseline is already determined?
Both houses of the legislature recommended a higher funding than we actually got.
Than we actually got.
Strange things happen in committee.
So the baseline is already determined at $1 million?
The baseline for our budget will be our current budget. So that's just where we're beginning. That is our beginning point. And then we'll have exceptional items.
We can have the recommendation to raise the baseline to 4 or something.
Absolutely, sure.
So it's really not determined yet.
There's a miscommunication.
So, yeah, well, our baseline budget is, our starting point is where we are right now. Anything we add on top of that as an agency is going to be done through an exceptional item process. So,
Oh,
for the
okay, so
entire
that puts us.
agency, the
okay.
budget is your starting point, not for the NHARP.
not for the NHARP, no.
Okay.
The discussion came up before you came back in. Dr. Azevedo said at institutions they have the freedom to move money around so that the baseline is not always the same as the previous biennium. Because I had told the committee that what I've seen from our agency, the baseline is always the previous biennium's funding.
And generally speaking, that is true.
So it's how agencies deal with these things by their internal decision-making process. We can expect that it is $1 million.
So, given that situation, maybe I would like to put a number on what Dr. Krishnamurti has suggested in the letter, and that we go back to where we were, not the last biennium, but the previous level, which makes sense. I mean,
It's $16 million.
yeah.
It's $16 million.
Actually, that's a sort of a complicated story because
Yeah.
it was really $8 million with the additional $8 million if the comptroller certified that the money was there.
Yeah, right. So I think 8 million was, but that was the number that you said. But whatever the previous amount for ARP was at that point, because we can't discuss the way we were discussing that we would split between the baseline request and the exceptional item. We were kind of not understanding.
Correct.
So in the exceptional item request, I guess I would like to see us at least put an additional $7 million to bring it back up to the $8 million. That's my suggestion.
And something on the technology side also, I think we need to we need to add. And I like Rin's idea of doing something big, one award, something really special, and track that program to demonstrate success.
Well, can we not put that into our letter, formulating how we would spend this? I mean, we have to justify this amount of money that we're asking.
What I recommend is let's get the money on hand first.
Yeah.
And then in the June meeting, perhaps when we get to the specific areas to fund in research, maybe that would be the public time to be considered.
Okay, but I guess we must be able to justify, and there are needs in a variety of areas, right? And we can certainly point those out and then decide later which one of those.
Well, we've talked about the argument that there are areas that we needed to support that we haven't been supporting because we didn't have enough money to go around. If we're going to suggest we support other areas, we always will support different areas each biennium. We should sort of figure out, I think, what areas that we'd like to move into in terms of things that would have an impact on the state. And, I don't know exactly what to propose at that point. But we should be, I think we all should be thinking about that, because if you're going to say we can't support all, we haven't been able to support all areas, and we'd like to, what areas do we want to add and why?
Well, where the pressures have come in the applications would be one way to read it. But I think it's very important. Why can't we just paint a broader brush, a stroke here, mentioning energy and biomedicine or whatever?
Environment and infrastructure. Those are the four.
Just name those as three really huge needs that we see pressure, not social pressures, but also application pressures, right? So if we put that in there, we don't have to be so specific, at least from my viewpoint. So I'm seeing frowns on Reinhold's face, but are we going in the right direction here?
I wasn't.
Oh, yeah, you're just contemplating. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you have to emphasize that NHARP in the progression. Let me back up and look at the big picture for just a second. The big picture is that in the last little over 200 years, the driving force for the expansion of economies has been technological advance, the development of the Industrial Revolution and so on. And the kind of things that NHARP supports are closer to the beginning of that progression from idea to economic development than they are towards the end of it. And so somehow or another, you have to make the point that the end of that's associated with developing better understanding of nature, better possible ideas for innovation is very important, certainly for the nation and the state in the long run. So we have to, I think one of the things we have to do is put NHARP in the context of where this work fits into the technological driving force of the economy. And so that's not an easy thing to do, but I think it's a very important thing to try to do.
Well, I think you have to get over the hump. I mean, you've got the coordinating board. They have one thought, and their thought is basic education. You have the legislature who appropriates everything. Theirs is how can I grow the state. Right. So you got to fit into that mold, and I think from the coordinating board, we got to convince them that increasing research improves the pipeline with in the future. None of them will understand what the research is about. You got to really talk to them about what does it do. It improves the educational experience of the students. Right now, without the research funding and so forth for the students, they sort of stop growing.
Well,
at a point.
Textbooks get very old.
Yeah, and then without the research
More than
programs
that,
and so
I think
forth, they don't grow.
in order to have a great education, you got to have outstanding faculty, and if you're going to have outstanding faculty, you need to have the research programs that nationally competitive faculty will aspire.
That's all part of the education.
As it is. Yeah, and that's what is the major driver and the major argument you can make between research and education. And in the bottom line is you want to do the research is to have the faculty to deliver the education. And I think we're missing the boat on that one. And I'm concerned that with dwindling federal dollars in research, things are going to lower. Despite any research dollar coming to the state, there is always a multiplier. It's about 1.7 of direct economic impact effect. That does not consider, for example, the future effects that we're talking about. The products of research, the patents, commercialization technologies that come down the road. And so I think we should have a funded program at the levels we had before, period. That's what the way I focus on.
Is there a way to show that when the funding went down 60 to 20 to 10, now 1, is there a way to show the loss in the universities? These programs going away, we've lost this in the universities because that directly goes to the education issue. If the board understands that.
Almost impossible to do that, just simply because it's a multivariable problem. Faculty are very creative. They can go and do other things. They find ways to make up the difference. But in terms of attractiveness to bring faculty from outside, clearly the ATP, ARP programs were outstanding in their ability to attract faculty.
Do we have
we have anecdotal information. We can provide sort of acceptance rates, but again, those have got other perturbations associated with it. So
I think we need to show some way what the loss is.
We might be able to show faculty acceptance rates.
Yeah, I do claim though it's difficult. It
is hard
to provide that
because there's so much other research funding that's gone down too.
When the recession hit, and Texas was one of the few states that didn't go through the recession, in spite of the fact that the ARP program was shrinking, we were getting much higher acceptance rates for faculty. So you'll have a little asterisk there.
Right.
In that regards, the state should have a lot of credit. A lot of universities went through significant budget reductions, lower salaries, furloughs, and everything else. Texas didn't go through that.
Right. But even taking all that, the numbers, relative to the entire research enterprise,
right,
is in the noise.
Exactly.
You'll never pick up signal in these numbers.
Right.
You won't know what it means.
You're right.
But one thing we could show, though, is I realize that the funding is used for many different aspects of research, but we can show on average, and I know but on most of these we fund a fair amount of personnel. So what we could do is just have an average cost of a graduate student, and basically how many graduate students does 60 million fund versus 1 million?
Yeah. Well, I think that was
on the other point of, this is Michael again, on the point about faculty recruitment issues, just remember both the Emerging Technology Fund and CIPRET also have components within them to recruit faculty from outside the state. So as you were noting earlier, this program helps that.
Right. Well, I think that was a good exercise in considering the other side of the equation, right? What you're saying, what did we lose? I think you can, as we discussed earlier, you can still make the argument of what you've gained. Particularly if you can find some success stories. these young investigators, or however it was run before, if you can show follow-on funding, or I've heard leverage, 6-to-1, 9-to-1, or whatever that is, if you can demonstrate that, I think you still get to the.
Well, we did that before, and we went from 60 million to 1.
That was a good strategy.
No, but I think also there were other programs that came on board in the state that took away from some of the things that we've talked about. They've all had controversy associated with them, and there is going to be a change in climate. We all have to, looking down to November, you're going to have a different governor. You're going to have a different legislative body there. I think this is the time, if we can say these programs were run without controversy, and were peer reviewed, they were nationally recognized as such. I think we've got a great case to make.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I totally agree with that. Pound that drum.
So it ultimately comes down to how much we recommend that we go to as a next step.
What I'm hearing is that we have to go with the 1 million baseline, and probably the 7 million exceptional.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Mm-hmm. And so we can. What I think I'll do is I'll sit down and try to write a letter to circulate to everybody. By the way, I guess all your contact information is here. I think it's in the packet, right?
Yeah, it's on the second or third page there.
Third page. Everybody's email is here.
Yep.
So that's then I would suggest that you take what I have, write to you, junk it, send your own version in, and we'll try to get the iteration done as rapidly as possible.
So let's set a deadline for that,
Okay.
so that it can get done. What is what's the time that we need to have this, Stacy?
Well, we've got the actual committee meeting of the board is going to happen on the 25th of June, and then the actual board meeting will be July 24th.
Okay.
So it would be very helpful to have it in as quickly as possible, because we do have to get our legislative appropriations requests done within the next few days internally. So if you all could get it into us with your suggestions by the 28th of May, if you can do it that quickly, that would be helpful.
Maybe even a couple of days before, because I heard Dr. Peoples talk about that this May 30th deadline was actually pushed. And the deadline, I think, was what we have to, our division's ideas going forward to the commissioner.
Okay.
And
So-
there was some talk that there a couple of days before, and I don't quite know, other meetings, etc.
So the
I would
earlier you can
advise.
get it to us, the better. But know that our board does meet on the 25th of June. It's our committee meetings.
But if we have to meet your deadline, that's the one we have to meet.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
That's the one we have to do.
So we have to get busy. I doubt that I'll get anything done before the weekend, but I'll try. You guys might want to. Maybe instead of it just being me, maybe everybody should sit down and try to write what they think is a justification letter for the proposed amounts, and we'll try to.
I don't think.
well, even if we put some points down on a thing and let you putting a whole bunch of letters together,
Okay.
you do the letter, but let's just throw the points out there, and then you can put them in the pot and distill them, and you're a good chemist.
So can you get your points, everybody? A lot of the points have been made. Okay, at this conversation, but some additional ones will certainly be thought. So we should you should, if you would go home and with all the leisure that I know you all have, try to send something to me early next week of any additional thoughts you have.
Might be wise to get a record of the vote, making sure we all support it.
Okay, so, well, we had one motion on the floor, but I suspected it was going to be amended after the new information that Stacy has given us.
Want to try to?
Let me propose a new motion. And I propose that this committee develop a letter to the coordinating board that requests that the NHARP program receive exceptional funding of an additional $7 million to enhance research and economic development in the state of Texas.
I second that motion.
So I guess we've had enough discussion. Or is anybody all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so I guess the future meetings is what we've just been talking about, and so item 8 appears to be adjournment. I would like to ask Stacy a question after we adjourn because she's a lawyer and can explain this business about the audit reports.
I must say I am not a lawyer. I am not an attorney, and I don't even play one ever.
I tried to parse the Texas Administrative Code, Title 19, Part 1, Chapter 1, Subchapter A, Rule 113, and I don't understand it.
Okay. I will take a look at it happily, but
Anyway.
I'll refer to legal counsel.
Anyway, are we motion to adjourn? All right. Voted on by everybody standing up.